yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet achim gam yachad. Welcome to our third and final session with Judy on this U.S. tour. I certainly hope that you will come back again to Ikar. You will always have a place here. I'm grateful to everybody for being here. If there happens to be anybody who's joining us online or afterwards who hasn't heard the previous two sessions, I invite you, or if you were here this morning and didn't hear last night, you can find these after Shabbat is over online. Two incredible shiurim, and this, of course, is our third. And while we only have you for a limited time here, I know that your Torah and your wisdom will continue to reverberate for months and years to come. So I am very thrilled to once again introduce Judy Klitsner. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. And by now you know that we don't take a single step without our sources. Does everyone have a copy? Okay. Okay, so if there is a unifying theme to all of the talks that we have been doing together, it would be this: mining and undermining. I hope by now you know what I'm talking about. Stories that are in conversation with one another, how we learn more about both by drawing them together, see how they reinforce, elucidate, interpret one another, and sometimes how one story will borrow language and themes of another in order to challenge its assumptions and sometimes to even radically overturn its conclusions. And this, looking at the Bible this way, is stories as it's kind of the sequeling of stories, presents the Bible as a very dynamic work in progress, where we start with something, the story, we think we've come to its conclusion, but that storyline is picked up again and sometimes spun out in an unexpected new way, giving much more breadth and depth to the entire matter. When I started working on this, I would say the most natural comparison to be made, and I loved it so much that it is chapter 1 in my book. I like to say, like with my children, I love them all equally, but the truth is, this is the one I love the most. My kids, I really do love them all equally, so it's true. But the story, when you think about it for a moment, if I just throw out these two names, Noah and Jonah, over to you. What do these two stories have in common? Water, okay, lots and lots of water. What else? Boats, animals. Boats feature very prominently. We're going to find both of these prophets on boats. What did you say? Animals, okay? Both stories prominently feature animals. And here already we're going to get to a hint of undermining, where would it be safe, first of all, if we had to vote right here and now for the strangest ending to a biblical book, the book of Jonah, hands down. What are the last couple of words of the book of Jonah? Uvehema rabbah, and lots of cattle. That's how the book ends, lots of cattle. But if we had to find, what are these two stories, what do they say about animals? Animals and humanity are united in their common fate. And here already we're getting the first glimmer of undermining, where both stories connect the fate of humanity with the fate of animals. But in the story of Noah, they are united in their what? Destruction. Whereas in the story of Jonah, they're united in you're on a roll, in their salvation, right? There's this great salvation at the end of the story, and there's a deep connection made between the human beings and the animals. All right, so we've got a mining and an undermining with that one, but let's get back to common themes. What else do the two stories have in common? What? Teshuvah. Okay, the story of Noah. Where's the Teshuvah? Okay, you're getting to way out there. Okay, that is beyond the scope of this conversation. What else? Yeah, more simply put, yes. Say again? Who's singled out? Jonah and Noah. Good, great. Tell me if you think this is a fair statement. Both of these stories focus more on the prophet than they do on any prophecy that they present. In fact, if we had to add up the total number of words of prophecy between the two prophets, how many words do we get to? Okay, it's fairly easy. With Noah, how many? Zero. And with Jonah, we get 5. Od 40 yom v'Ninveh nehepachet. 40 more days, and Ninveh will be overturned. So what we're going to get to is really what we see is that this is a study more of these people than it is about anything that they actually do. All right, what about the 40 days? Come on, guys, 40 days. All right, famously, the flood lasts for 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days brings about destruction. What happens in the book of Jonah? What he's going to announce to the people is in 40 days more, Nineveh is going to be overturned. What happens in those 40 days? Here's your teshuvah. I'll allow you this. The people of Nineveh actually do teshuvah, and they overturn their fate. Okay, so 40 days in the first story bring on destruction. 40 days in the second story turns out to be a period of time that brings on salvation and averting destruction. Okay, so you're getting the idea here. We're on a certain trajectory where the first story is going to posit sin. Oh, nobody said sin. What about sin? Sin, right? Both stories are about large sinful populations under threat of destruction. What happens in the story of Noah is they meet their destruction, whereas the grand ending of the book of Jonah is that they avert that destruction. Anything else in common before we get to differences? Yeah.
What stories are about people who clearly care more about themselves than about the people around them?
You mean the prophets? Okay, so that's when we look at the prophets. So you're taking that a step further. You're saying it's not just about them; it's about some problematic prophets. Okay, and we're going to look at that. There's something that is troubling about these two prophets. Definitely. What else?
There's some plants at the end.
Good. We've got these suddenly sprouting plants, right? We've got the gourd in the story, or however you translate that word, kikayon. And what do we have in the story of Jonah? We've got the olive branch. You've got the vineyard that he plants. Okay, we've got so there's sort of an ecological message. The people, the animals, the plants. It's all connected. What else?
Questions around how far do I trust God?
Okay. How far do I trust? Okay, we're going to return to that. Something going on between God and the prophet. Do the prophets actually believe in what God wants them to do? Good. What else? What are these books? What?
Why is Noah a prophet? Did he prophesize anything?
Good. That is a very fair question, and I thought I could get away with calling him that, but apparently I'm now busted. I use the word with some latitude. Some people would argue that he's not a prophet because the very definition of prophet is somebody who brings to prophecy. Fair enough. What are these stories, if I can put it this way, what are these two stories not about? They're not about a lot of things. They're not about, giraffes. But what else are they not? Well, maybe they are about giraffes. No, sorry. I'm sorry. Scratch that. There's something that is basic to many biblical stories that is not the focus in either one of these stories, and that is Jews, right? These are universal stories. The story of the flood is the story of the world that is under threat of destruction because it is sinful. And the story of Jonah is remarkable in that it is God's concern for some city which is in modern day Iraq, a city called Nineveh, where God is so concerned about that city that God sends a prophet in order to warn them of what's coming. Okay, so both stories have a really strong universal focus. What about language? All right, here things are getting a little harder. That was the easy part. Any words that are shared between the story? Who said that? Well done. Okay, Yonah. I mean, how do we get the Yonah, which means a dove, and that, of course, the function of the dove in the story of Jonah is It's the messenger that Noah sends out to find out if the world is inhabitable again after the great flood. It is the quintessential messenger. Remember, he sends a different bird first that doesn't do the job, but the dove is something that the prophet can rely on. And just to get ahead of ourselves, but here we're going to have a prophet who's named Jonah, named for a messenger bird. And what are we going to find out about him? God is going to say, deliver a message over there. What's he going to say? Oh, you want me to go over there? I'm going over there. Right? He is a messenger, named for a messenger, but he is a messenger who refuses to deliver messages. And in fact, what we're going to see when we get to the book of Jonah is that the book is going to be primarily about a failed messenger who is on the receiving end of messages. God is going to throw messengers at Jonah throughout the book, harnessing all of nature and flinging it at him, right? Like the sun, what else? The worm, the storm, everything. Everything is God appointing this and saying, here, Jonah, come back. Let me get you back with this. Okay. Hamas, the word Hamas, we talked about this earlier, appears in both stories, meaning violence. That is the action that is taking place between people. People are practicing violence against one another. That's the final straw. God says, I'm going to... That seals the fate of humanity. They're going to be destroyed because they're filled with Hamas. What we're going to find in the book of Jonah is, again, the reversal of that, where God is going to see that the people are going to renounce the Hamas that they're practicing, and God says, because of that, I'm going to save you. Okay, in addition to that, we've got places of names like Tarshish, like in Nineveh. Believe it or not, those two names that are so prominent in the book of Jonah appear in the story of the flood just after the flood is over and the world spreads out into all of its locations. Those are specific names. Okay, we could keep going, but have I made the point? Do these two stories belong together? They are in conversation with one another. Okay, let us now get to work. We're going to start mining, and then we're going to undermine. Source number one, let's start with the story of Noah. When we first meet him, we are told, quite the testimonial, Eile toldot Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav et ha'elohim italech Noach. This is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. Good guy or bad guy? Good guy, okay? Rashi, unfortunately, is very, very hard to please. Let's look at Rashi. There are those among our rabbis who interpret this as praise, right? Some people think this is okay. And there are those who interpret this as an insult. In his generation, he was righteous, but had he been in the generation of Abraham, he would have been considered as nothing. What is bothering Rashi here? Why is he so hard on Noah when we seem to have this statement, this in the text testifying, this testimonial to his sterling character? Yes?
The bar was really low of what constitutes good.
What is? The bar was low. But what is it? Before we get to that, though, what in the language of the text is leading him to that? In his time, we've got this qualifier, right? He was blameless in his time, bidorotav. We don't need that qualifier, and the qualifier actually seems to take away from the absolute nature of his goodness. And if I could just take a moment to reflect on this, this always reminds me, there was this terrible song that was very popular when I was a teenager, and I remember thinking way back then, please let no one ever write such a terrible song to me. I've been married for over 40 years. I'm still working on this, but the guy croons about 100 times the same words. You are so beautiful to me, right? Wrong. You are so beautiful, full stop, quit while you're ahead, right? And what Rashi is doing here, and I don't care what anybody else says, what Rashi's doing here is looking at this verse and saying, right, the text is saying, Noah, you're so beautiful to me, right? So, of course, that leads us to look for what's wrong with him. What is wrong with him? So now he tells us where to go. Who do we have to compare him to? Where does he fall short? Abraham. And again, if we look at the story of Abraham, we have yet another story of a large sinful population under threat of destruction. And here we have Abraham. And now I want to ask you to look at source number 2 with me and see the difference between the response of Noah when he is told about the impending destruction and the response of Abraham when he is told about his impending destruction. Okay, when Noah is told about what's going to happen, God says, in 7 days' time, I will make it rain on the earth. I'll blot out, think of these chilling words, I will blot from the earth all existence that I created. Every living thing is going to die. What's Noah's response? Noah did so just as God commanded him, so he did. Loyal servant, straight up, does exactly what God says. Sounds good. But when we compare him to Abraham, and here you might notice, I mentioned this, by the way, this morning, that my second favorite technique is noticing words that recur, which seems to be an unusual number of times within a relatively short amount of textual space. Here, the word that I have underlined, ulai, repeats itself in this text no fewer than 6 times. When God says to Abraham, I'm going to kill the sinful people of Sodom, Abraham launches into this impassioned plea on behalf of these people who are, he's not arguing that they're not bad. He's just saying, please save them. Maybe, ulai, maybe there are 50 righteous people hiding among them. God says, okay, if there are 50, I'll spare the city. Well, let's not quibble about 5. What if there are 45, maybe 40? And there's this bargaining that goes on until they get down to 10. And at that point, the bargaining session ends. And it seems that there aren't even 10 and the city is destroyed. But I want to ask you for a moment, if you had to characterize this, think about for a moment, what are these 2 prophets? Can I call them prophets? Okay, what are they both thinking here? What is Noah thinking when he does precisely what God says to do? I'm going to destroy the world, take out your toolbox, build an ark and get in it without uttering a word. Yes, I'll do it, I'm doing it. Whereas Abraham says, maybe. What's going on here? On what principles are these 2 people functioning, would you say? Yes?
I'm wondering about the word servant, and the difference is righteousness versus justice.
Okay, great. Yeah.
To see this difference, you actually have to understand that what Noah didn't fight for, that Abraham did, was justice.
Good.
Because righteousness implies going beyond where you should, but this seems to be a measure of just doing what you should.
Okay, good. So a loyal servant taken on its own can be something very laudable, but when we compare him with someone who took it to the next level and said justice is one level, and what would you call that other thing that Abraham is pushing for? What does he want?
No, I'm actually saying I think that Abraham understood that justice is in the hands of humans as well as God, and was saying, no, that's not just what you're doing, what you want to do, God. Whereas Noah was just sort of blindly saying,
Okay.
God's the one that sets justice. And
Right.
how they say
Okay, yeah.
Can I defend Noah, please?
We're not. Nobody's offending Noah. Nobody's offending him. Let's wait before you rush to his defense. What are they thinking? So if one is looking for justice, and I think that's fair, that what Noah is saying is, and think about it, and I'll defend Noah for a second. Tamim haya bedorotav. He was blameless in his age, works in his favor. Can you imagine living in a society where everyone is evil and you have the wherewithal to stand up to that? And now God says, I'm going to destroy the world. These people have lived these terrible lives. They deserve to die. You have lived against all odds. You have lived a good life. You deserve to live. And it appears that Noah is accepting that very simple equation. It's true. It's just. There's a certain certainty to it. There's a logic to it. But Abraham, and here I might differ with you a little bit, I think what Abraham is doing is going beyond the logic of it. These people are evil. Most of them are. To all appearances, this is a society that is infused with evil. But he's asking for something else. Maybe there are this number of righteous people who, by their merit, can allow the entire city to live. That's not justice. What is that? What? Mercy, chesed, it's something beyond, right? And I would say that there's something in addition to this that Abraham is employing here. Possibility. The word ulai here is so central. It's a fantastic word. He's saying, Noah's looking at what is certain, what is visible to the naked eye. This is the way it is. Let's do act according to what we see. Whereas Abraham's saying, how about trying imagination, God, right? Can't you stretch a little? Ulai, maybe there's something else here. Maybe there's something we haven't seen yet. Maybe people can be different than they appear. Ulai. He's challenging God, which is quite amazing, to try to see things through that lens. And I would also just add one other piece, and that is Noah sees himself, it seems, as separate from the world around him. You get what you deserve, I get what I deserve. We're not together in this. Whereas Abraham is putting himself on the line. He's first of all drawing together the people in Sodom and saying, let these people atone for those people. And then he's also saying, let my merits help the people here. I'm afraid maybe you're going to, God, don't get angry at me, but I'm going to put myself in danger with you in order to try to appeal to them. So there's this kind of interconnectedness that seems to be assumed by Abraham that isn't assumed by Noah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that, I mean, yes, and also, I wonder, Abraham is not given the same option as Noah. In other words, when God says to Noah, the world, everybody's bad,
Right.
so you people are the little bit of people who are good, I'm going to save you and destroy the rest.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the proposition that God gives to Abraham. God
Right.
says to Abraham, I'm going to destroy the whole city.
Right.
And Abraham says, are you going to kill the innocent along with the guilty?
Right.
So if Abraham had been offered the option of, go tell the city, I'm going to destroy the city, but the righteous few will be allowed to live.
Right, he wasn't offered that. Right,
That was,
right,
it wasn't,
true.
there's
Right,
not-
you're right. And you know what, I'm sorry, you're all going to have a lot of questions, but if we're ever going to get out of here, I'm going to keep going. And I'm happy to stay afterwards and take all the questions and all the criticisms and everything else. But let's move on, because you might, just do the math here. Look. Okay, all right. Okay. I want to get back to a point that was made earlier, which is that these stories are more about the prophets than they are about their prophecies. And what interests me in all of this is what happens to Noah. Let's start with him as a result of his silence. Bottom line is he does not take action in order to appeal on behalf of the people. They are killed. Okay, and what happens to him? And here, generally speaking, the Bible does not reflect on the feelings of its characters. It doesn't say Abraham was depressed or jubilant or anything else, right? We have to work for it. We have to read between the lines. And here, if you look at source number 3, I think we've got some pretty interesting lines to read between. When the flood is over and God says, I want you to exit the ark, notice the repetition in this passage. God says, we'll look at it in English, come out of the ark, every living thing of all flesh that is with you. Be fertile and increase on earth. Pru or vu. Where have we heard those words before? Right, in the creation story where God says this to the first man and the first woman. How many times does God say these words to the first man and the first woman? One time, okay? Now notice how many times it is said here. Be fertile and increase. God blessed Noah and his sons. Be fertile and increase. Abound on the earth and increase. Pru or vu. Then we add in a little revu for good measure. And you, be fertile and increase. Abound on the earth and increase. Over and over and over. Why does God have to keep on repeating this? And in addition to this, what you don't have on the page, oh, actually you do, I will uphold my covenant. The word brit appears in this one text, I think 10 times, maybe 7, where God keeps saying, it's a covenant, I promise the world is going to be inhabitable again, the seasons are going to come back. You can have faith, you can trust that the world is going to be here. Okay? This is all said to Noah as he comes out of the ark. And what is Noah's response to this? And Noah, the man of the earth, planted a vineyard. And he drank from the wine and became drunk. And he uncovered himself within his tent. ... Thank goodness for that. And Noah lived after the flood for 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years and he died. Okay. What's going on? What is God communicating to Noah and what is happening to Noah? Any ideas? Why does God have to keep saying to Noah after the flood, pru revu, revu? Why is God so repetitive when it was enough to say this to the first human beings one time? Yeah. Trauma, resistance, right? And it's very hard to relate to this, and the only way that I can is to think about the Holocaust survivors that I've spoken to. The notion that the world around you has completely been destroyed, now just start over, and it's not so simple. People are traumatized by that. And we might say that Noah, why is he traumatized? He was the only person who had foreknowledge of this. He knew what was happening, but I think it's very understandable to say, well, knowing about it and living through it are two very different things. So perhaps what we've got is trauma. What else might we have here? again, thinking of Holocaust survivors, guilt, right? First of all, we might have survivor guilt, which I always thought was very hard to understand because it's not logical, but it's real, right? The sense of why am I here when everybody I know is gone? But add to that perhaps some sense of real guilt here, or I don't mean real, but I mean the kind of guilt that we understand, which is I'm the only one who knew about this. God told me, and I did nothing about it. And now look what has happened to the world. And I just want to finish the way that I'm understanding this. And I'm going out on a limb here, but this is just what spoke to me when I looked at it this way, is that with this guilt, Noah feels a certain belated connection with the world around. He's now guilty, shares the guilt of the world, whereas before he was separate in his righteousness. And in some very symbolic way, he shares their fate, right? They all die by drowning. And he, in a sense, you look at this text where the text kills him off prematurely. What happens in those 350 years that he lives? We're not told anything about him. The text is done with him. After he is in this drunken stupor, he puts himself into a kind of comatose slumber where he debases himself in front of his own children. And then the text says, and he died. Okay? In a sense, symbolically, he too dies with death by drowning by his own hand. Right? Why is he drinking? What's the drinking about? If it's trauma and it's guilt, it's right, substance abuse, escape, he can't, it's unbearable for him. He needs to find a way out. And this is essentially the end of Noah's story, where he begins with this illustrious manner. He's righteous, blameless in his age, and he ends essentially in this drunken, comatose obliteration of his life. So it's tragic, but, and this is really where I want to go with this same story is going to be picked up again, the same storyline, with all those connections that we saw at the beginning, and it's going to question the basic assumption, and here, what are those assumptions? One, on the part of God. We will talk about God just for a second, which is, in God's world of justice, does all that sin have to add up to assured destruction? Is there another way for this story to play out? And I think it also raises questions about the prophet. Is there potential within this story for the prophet to step up and somehow take part in the salvation of the world and then maybe escape the terrible fate that this prophet meets? So let us move on to source number 5. And here I'm going to ask you to take 3.5 minutes, I'm counting, to look at this story on your own. I would really prefer if you could talk to the person next to you and make a little bit of noise. I will feel much better if it isn't dead silent in here. But to look at this story, which we're going to argue is the parallel text. It is the conversational partner with the story of Noah. And what we're going to meet here are the same 3 basic characters that we saw in the story of Noah. We've got God, we've got the sinful population under threat of destruction, the world, if you will, and we've got the prophet. For purposes, I want to stipulate for our purposes that in this chapter 1 of the book of Jonah, the world is, as Rashi claims, the sailors on the boat are a microcosm of the world at large. Okay, so look at this story as if those sailors are the world. God is still God. The prophet now is Jonah. My question to you as you skim through this chapter, source number 5, are these 3 characters the same as we have seen them, or are they different? God, the prophet, the world. Okay, 3.5 minutes, over to you. Make some noise, rockin' Beit Midrash. Let's go.
Down to there's a storm, the ships of the earth breaking up, sailors are raging, crying out, Jonah and God judged them all 2 lessons. They down to the crowd that said how he was sleeping, God kind of perish.
My name is Wendell.
It's nice to meet you.
But
Yes.
actually, this is boring.
Yeah.
It always with said and draw, but it is God.
That's
So-
a beautiful name.
So that the boy who wrestled with the angel, that
Is it Peniel? Is that your name?
yeah.
I know that story. That's such a good name. Very nice to meet you, Peniel.
So that actually, when you were talking about God, that actually reminded me of my name, Peniel.
I'm glad you were listening.
Well, but they say that what's your issue? He said, actually, this is my but he, yeah, they're I understand, yeah. Well, that's what Jonah says in the Bible. He says, and then he cried to not do that, and they call us please, let's not perish. And finally, they came to us, and he stopped. Yes, well,
When you are finished, eye contact will let me know. Okay. Okay. Okay, with great apologies, you need an hour for this, but we don't have it. Is God the same or is God different? The same? Who said the same? The same as God was in the story of Noah. God does something, one major difference in the story here. What does God do here that God did not do in the story of Noah? Sends a warning. Sends the prophet. And here, getting back to the question about God, we gave God a bit of a pass, did we not? Whereas we're putting it all on the prophet. Why doesn't he warn the people? Well, why doesn't God tell him to warn the people? Here, God, and if your homework is go back to the previous source on the page, we get a sense that God has changed in the story of Noah from the before the flood to after the flood. God characterizes humanity as hopelessly evil, but before the flood says humanity is hopelessly evil and so I have to kill them. And after the flood, God says humanity is hopelessly evil and I will not kill them. Okay, that change, I think, underlies the book of Jonah, where God now says, let me give them a chance. Let me now call on my prophet in order to let those people know that they're in danger so that maybe they'll do something different. In addition to that, God, I would say, is more compassionate toward the prophet. God, in this story, is not going to leave that prophet alone to die in that tent. Something's going to happen. God is not going to leave this poor guy alone. He's going to be, okay, we'll get to him in a moment. Let's talk about the prophet. What about the prophet? Jonah. Is he the same as Noah or different? God says to him, Kum lech, get up and go. How ironic. What does he do? Vayakom, he gets up. Laredet, to go down. And then we have a series of descents. And here, for the very first time, you know that Israel, being among many, many other virtues, is the startup nation. We invent all kinds of brilliant things. And one of those is here. I brought it with me from the land of Israel, the very first time, the Shabbos PowerPoint. Are you ready? Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, here it is. Start up. Vayered. Vayered. Yarad 3 times, and then finally a play on the word Vayered. Vayeradam. It's not the same word, but it is phonetically playing on this descent. God says, get up. He gets up to go down, 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 until ultimately he goes into the greatest descent of all, which is slumber. Right? Does this sound familiar to anyone? A comatose-like slumber, that is, right? That's where we left Noah. And now Jonah begins his story there. And again, this book is asking us, can this prophet be saved? Okay, there the question is thrown to us. Let's go on to the world. If the world is these sailors, what do we know about the world in this story? How would you characterize them? Yeah.
Well, they were all descendants of Noah and Noah's children.
Okay, that's true. But what about their behavior here? How would you, yeah.
They're like children. They're looking for someone else to.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay, I kind of like them more than that, but yeah.
Even though they identified us with the troubles, Jonah tells them, throw me overboard.
And what do?
They try to ride it out.
Are they not I think they're incredible. These people are the most remarkable people I've ever seen. Right? They first of all, I don't know if you noticed, these certain things you can see only in the Hebrew, but no, that's not true. I translated it very, very literally. Did you notice there was a very subtle shift in the way that they are referred to in this text? At the beginning, they're called sailors, malachim, not angels, but with a chet, meaning like salty people. And somewhere in the middle, they are called, they transform into anashim. They're people, they're humanity at large. Right? And together with that, we have a word that recurs 6 times in this story, the word yirah, fear. What do they fear at the beginning of the story? These are a bunch of pagan sailors sailing off to the end of the world. What are they afraid of at the beginning of the story? Death, the storm, right? All this, the forces of nature. At the end of this chapter, it's outrageous. What are they fearing? God, they're bringing sacrifices. It's crazy. They transform themselves completely before the eyes of Jonah. And morally, they are truly remarkable, as somebody pointed out, right? They know somebody's responsible. They cast these lots. They believe in those lots. They keep on falling on Jonah. And then instead of throwing him overboard, they say, excuse me, sir, what should we do with you? And he says, read my lips, pick me up and throw me overboard. And instead of doing that, they row madly trying to save him. Okay, it's really quite remarkable. I would say that they are remarkable both by their example and also in their mode of speech. How do these people talk? Did you notice anything unusual about the inflection of every single statement that these people make? Every single thing, right? They say, lo noved, me'ayin, ma, mi, where, who, what, how, over and over and over again, question after question. And of course, I hope you noticed our word back from the Abraham story. Which one? Ulai, the captain says, maybe, we never heard of your God, but maybe that God, we're open to it. These are open questioners. They don't know things for certain. They are open to hearing something new. And in fact, as a result of hearing something new, they transform themselves from pagans into God-fearing human beings who bring sacrifices at the end of the story. In addition, I hope you notice the words velo noved. They use those same words. We don't have to die. Al na novda. Twice we have this plea and this belief, maybe we don't have to die. And I think this is, in a sense, the anthem of the book, right? Maybe we don't have to die. Maybe there's something we can do for ourselves so that we can overturn that fate and do something and do something completely different. I want to argue, and we're going to move ahead toward the end of the book here, that Jonah is going to be almost the opposite of these people, where they are going to say, and notice here in the story where they're asking questions, and he says to them, it's 4 lines from the bottom of the Hebrew, he says, Ki yodea ani. These are people who live without knowing for sure. They're asking question after question after question, and he speaks a language of certainty. I see this as very, very similar to Noah, who looks at things in a kind of truthful, certain manner. This is just, it's true, that's the way I got to go. I'm God's loyal servant. Here, I think, very much in line with Noah, we have Jonah, who's saying, Yodea ani, I know I'm at fault. I know I deserve to die. I'm telling you, throw me out of this boat. These people are operating under a completely different mode of understanding, and they're saying, yeah, that might be true, but maybe something else can happen anyway, and we're going to keep on trying. If you look ahead now, if you just turn to source number 6, we're going to skip ahead to the end of the book and then go back one chapter. But at the very end of the book, we finally get to the reason that Jonah ran to begin with. This is kind of a mystery, and I remember I first learned this with my teacher, who I want to mention every time I speak, Nechama Leibovitz, of blessed memory, and she taught this as a kind of mystery story, that the key piece of it is absent. Why does he run away? And he doesn't tell us that. He just runs, and we only find out in the last chapter of the book, where he finally divulges what was eating him to begin with that made him run. And he says, after the city is spared, and we're going a little bit out of order, but after the city is spared, Jonah's reaction is anger and misery. And here he calls out to God in source 6. He prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, isn't this just what I said when I was still in my own country? That is why I fled beforehand to Tarshish." Why? For I knew, ki yadati. Here's that verb again. Yodea ani, yadati. I knew it. What did I know? That you are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in kindness. Where have we heard these words before? El chanun v'rachum, erech apayim v'rav chesed. You sing it on the high holidays. These are the 13 attributes of God that we say as praise of God. How is Jonah using these words? He lobs off the last word, which is, it's supposed to be erech apayim v'rav chesed ve'emet, meaning truth. He lobs off the word truth, excises it from the convention, and replaces it with v'nicham al hara'ah. You are not a God of truth. Basically, he's using these words of praise as words of accusation against God. You are a God of lies. You are a God who renounces punishment when punishment is what should happen by the laws of truth, by the laws of justice. And here, if we're looking and analyzing Jonah's name, if he is named after the dove in an ironic way that he doesn't deliver messages, think also about his patronymic, Ben Amitai, from the word emet, from truth. He is a dove, a failed messenger, the son of truth. And here is a guy who's yearning for truth. Where are those certainties that I'm yearning for? I don't have them, and he's accusing God and saying, God, I demand this, but you have not provided it. You are, and that's why I didn't go. I didn't want to deliver a message that was false. These people are sinners. They should perish. Those are the rules. And God is saying, well, there are new rules now. I'm sending you there to give them a chance, right? And here he's protesting. Okay, yeah. Quick question, yeah.
Is he like Noah, that Noah was happy everybody was going to drown, and he wanted everybody in Assyria to die?
I think that is, in fact, what he does want. He thinks that these people should reap what they have sown. Yes. Yes, and that going there to try to get them to change would be a pretense, and it wouldn't be true, and so it's all futile anyway. He doesn't want to take part in this sham. Okay, he wants to have the rules of logic and consistency there. Say it again.
Did Noah ask people to build boats like he was?
No, we don't see that. Okay, let's go now to source number 7, where we're meeting the second population, and I would argue that this Nineveh also is another microcosm for the world. And here on our Shabbos PowerPoint, we have, and here, this is what happens when Bible teachers doodle while they're talking on the phone. The letters of the word oniyah, meaning the boat, are almost the same letters in the word Nineveh in Hebrew. The nun, the yud, the vav, the hey. Okay, don't look at this. This is coming later. But obviously, what's the next piece of this puzzle is going to be Yonah. It's all playing on those same letters. Somehow this text is trying to tell us they are all one. And so here we meet the second world, and it's called repeatedly Ha'ir HaGedolah, the big city. It is every city, it is the metropolis, it is the world. And here what happens, where Jonah finally does, he understands, what we skipped is he spends a little time in a fish, and he realizes, I don't want to go back into a fish, so I'm going to do what God says this time, okay? And so God appears to him and says, now again, Kum lech el Ninveh, go to the city, and this time, Vayakom Yonah vayelech. He doesn't go down, he goes to the city, and he calls out what we talked about at the beginning, these 5 magic words, and we're going to get back to this in a moment. What is so effective about these words? Od 40 yom v'Ninveh nehepachet, which literally means in 40 days more, Ninveh will be overturned. But look at the result that happens. As a result of this, the people of Nineveh believed in God. They called a fast. They put on sackcloth from the biggest to the smallest. The word reached the king, and the king says, and here comes the ridiculous part about the animals and the people. Everybody's fasting. Everybody's wearing sackcloth. Nobody eat anything, and call out to God. And more important than calling out and making the show is actually change your behavior, give up the Hamas, and then he says these fantastic words, Mi Yodea, who knows? Maybe God will change this decree, and we velo noved. These are the words taken directly from the sailors. Maybe we don't have to die. This is a repeat of the sailors. Jonah, who says, Yodea ani, I know, I live in the world of certainty. And here we have the sailors who are, in a sense, the Abraham figure, who are saying, Ulai, mi yodea, who knows? Ask the questions, don't give the answers. This is what life is. Life is possibility. The people on the boat transformed themselves. Jonah saw it. He saw that people can change. This is what he doesn't believe in, that people can really change, but yet he's been witnessing it. He witnesses it on the boat. He witnesses it here in the city of Nineveh. Can he, getting back to Yonah being part of that equation, can he see himself as part of that? In any case, the people repent. And the question of what is so powerful about these words, think about it. There are whole books of the prophets that go on for more than 50 chapters. Repent, O ye sinners, and everybody ignores them. Here we have one reluctant prophet uttering 5 words, and everybody changes everything. What is it in these words? Od 40 yom, 40 days more. First of all, he's invoking the 40 days. People understand what that time frame means, right? They can imagine in their heads the idea of the flood. V'Ninveh nehepachet, and I think this word nehepachet, which literally means will be overturned, is a wonderful double entendre for us. I think that what God wants him to say is, what Jonah wants to say is, 40 days more. I know I have to say this now, but I'm going to reduce it to the minimum. I'm not going to put any emotion into it. I'm going to tell the people 40 more days, Nineveh will be reduced to rubble. Nehepachet, and this verb is the same verb that's used in the city of Sodom. Utter destruction, pick it up, turn it upside down, and destroy it. But what do the people of Nineveh hear? Od 40 yom, v'Ninveh nehepachet. And think about in the Megillah of Esther, v'nahafochu. What other meaning does that word lahafoch have? To overturn. It can be changed from one state to another. What the people are hearing is 40 days more and Nineveh can be overturned. We can overturn our fate. Right? What he's speaking is the language of assured destruction, and what they're hearing is ulai, mi yodea. Maybe something else can happen here. We can overturn everything here. It's up to us. And what we see is that they seize that opportunity. They change their behavior from top to bottom. and they are spared, and the subversive sequel, there's the words, to the story of the flood it happens here. 40 days from destruction to salvation. Hamas doesn't seal their fate, but overturning Hamas saves them. The people and the animals are united not for their destruction, but for their salvation. The last piece of this text, the big question is, what about Jonah? The people are saved. The world saves itself. Can he see himself as connected to this world? And can this prophet be saved? That's the last piece here. And I want to just, in order to begin addressing this question, I want to read you something from a wonderful essay by Martin Buber, where he addresses the question of, can human beings really change? Okay, that's a question for the ages. Can we really change? And he says, basically, he says this. He says, sure, but here's the catch. In order to change, he says, you have to believe that you can change. He says, inner transformation simply means, nothing simple about this, surpassing one's present factual constitution. It means that the person one is intended to be penetrates what has appeared up until now, that the customary soul enlarges and transfigures itself into, I love this, the surprise soul. We all have two souls. We have the customary soul, the one that we know inside and out. We know everything about it. But we also have lurking deep inside us, and it's there, but it's only there if you believe it's there, this other soul that can shock the daylights out of us if we let it show itself. Okay, that's called the surprise soul. And as I was reading this in Buber, how could we not imagine, right, the day in the Jewish calendar that is set aside for the very notion of human transformation? What day is that? Yom Kippur, when we read this book. And as the sun is setting on Yom Kippur, we read it in the afternoon, in the Mincha prayer, right? It's another reversal. It's the voice of doubt seeps in with us. And if I could just get personal for a second, I don't know about you, but I stand there in shul, and an outsider, this would look quite absurd. I stand there going like this, al chait, I did this, I did that, I'm confessing. And what I notice every year is that there are 2 or 3 things where I clap just a little bit harder for those 2 or 3 things. And then it hits me, oh my gosh, I think I clapped just that hard last year for those same exact things. Right? And 5 years ago, same. 10 years ago, I won't go back. And who am I kidding? I'm standing here promising God that I'm going to be different, but I will not be different. This is who I am. Right? And it's at this moment that we read this book where that voice of doubt, and here's another wonderful reversal, where that voice of doubt is given. The voice of the doubt is given not to the people, but to the prophet who doesn't believe that people can change. And the world, we meet up with these people on the boat, we're meeting up with these people in Idve who are saying, open your eyes. There are surprise souls presenting themselves all around you. They're transforming themselves. Just look at it and you will believe it, that it is actually possible. Right? So that's, I think, this incredible thing. And I just want to get to the very end of the book because we are, in fact, out of time. The question that we're left with is, can Jonah see it? Can he internalize it? Can he connect himself with the people? Can he be part of the undoing of the subversive sequel? Can he undo the terrible fate of Jonah by connecting his fate with that of the rest of the world? And here we get to the very, very end where the book, as it absolutely had to, ends with the right inflection, and that is a question mark. Source number 8. And we won't get into this impossible text, this speech that God makes, but basically it goes like this. God said to Jonah, should I not care about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well? There it is, the Behema Rabbah. Right? So I think on the one hand, one message that we're left with is the inflection, the question. It drives home the central message of this book, which is life is questioning. Questioning is life. As long as we question, we're asking rather than answering, we leave open all possibilities. And I think adding to that and reinforcing it are these words, asher lo yada, that on the one hand, these words, they don't know the difference between their right and their left. This is both the greatest weakness and the greatest strength of humanity. On the one hand, they don't know the difference. They're like like the animals, stumbling in the dark. They need a lot of help, a lot of chesed just to survive. But the other hand, the greatness of humanity is they live in a state of not knowing. They live in a state of ulai, of miodea, of maybe something else is possible. Okay, the end of the book, we are left with, Jonah doesn't answer. We're left only with his enigmatic silence. And I'll leave you with this thought that his book, like life itself, remains a profoundly open question. And with that, if anybody has questions, I promise not to have answers.
Do you want to take a few minutes?
Happy to, yes.
Okay, sure, great. So we can take a couple of minutes of questions if folks want to engage in conversation.
But my answer to every question is going to be, I'm not certain. Yes.
I just want to try something out here.
Sure.
You landed on, oh, sorry. Thank you so much, first of all. But I want to try to subvert your sequel.
Go for
if
it.
I can.
Yeah.
You said it. So you landed on life is questioning. I want to propose that what the text is telling us is to question is to be human.
Okay.
You talked about the transformation of Malachim to Anashim. If we look at the Noah story, he's really sounds a lot like an angel. He's descended from people who live forever. We have in early Genesis the notion of sort of these
superhumans,
right?
Yeah.
Superhumans.
Right,
But then at the end of the story, the text goes to pains to call him a man of the earth.
Yeah.
So he becomes human. Yonah goes in the other direction. He gets to live in a fish. He's someone who maybe isn't as human. I mean, he's human, but he isn't behaving like a human. He's behaving like a malach. He's just sort of saying, I'm supposed to follow orders, and those orders are supposed to land. And I'm wondering whether the story of Yonah isn't as much, to your point, about the sailors who became human and the Ninevites who could transform because they could ask questions. And what made Abraham so great was that he was human. He could ask questions. Noah couldn't. He was in that like an angel.
Okay.
So I'm just, you use the language of Malachim
Yeah.
and Anashim, and it seems to be an echo of the transformation of Noah from a something to an Ish Hadama.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Does Noah end up a bad guy?
Noah? Depends how you view him.
Bad nature, drunk, curses his
Yeah,
offspring.
right. See, I tried to skip that. You're not letting me. Yeah. It's very problematic. It's a very troubling end to his story where he ends up cursing his own descendants. Very tough. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the fish?
What would you like me to say about it?
I'm just curious about the symbolism of the fish. Or
Right.
What are we
Right.
supposed to take away from his experience of being in the fish? Or what one might take away.
There's some, I mean, it's surreal. There's a lot of discussion in the literature about whether, he's really in a fish or does it symbolize something? I don't know. I mean, what I get from it is simply the ordeal that he goes through, the fact that he's given a second chance. But even that, he's not completely convinced. I don't know. Lo yodat. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you talked a lot about knowing and doubting, and I'm wondering if you can talk about fear, whether it's yirat or pachad, and how that fits into that dance of the ulai versus the
Interesting.
yodea or lo yodea.
Yeah, the ability to fear seems to be connected to the ability to remain open. I'd like to think that the fear, that there's a kind of evolution of fear from pachad to yirah, and those are two very different things. One is like literally a fear of danger, and the other, by the end, is really more like awe. And in Hebrew, it is the same word, but it seems that what they transform into are people who live with a sense of awe at something greater than themselves. So I do see that as part of their transformation. Definitely. Yeah.
I just want to go back to Herb's point at the beginning about this Noah prophet. And it looks like one of the things you're saying is that everyone who changes their life is a prophet. But that's a sort of context. You have not said something, but you've done something like that in the vineyard, therefore pointing the way to changing and acting on that change. So Jonah did the same thing.
That's
You don't
nice.
need to declare something, you just need to do something.
Nice. Yeah.
This reads to me like a warning against bad religion. And that's why you highlighted the word breeds in here in the middle. And like Noah thinks that to be in relationship with God means to comply with God's desires, kenasat, whatever they are, even if they totally contradict your moral intuition. Jonah thinks that to be in relationship with God means like you got to get away because God's going to make you do something you don't want to do. So it's like one is comply. One is deny, and then it's Abraham and the people and the sailors and Nineveh who are the ones who say it's actually defy. It's not comply and it's not deny. There's something about being in covenant that means like you stay here and fight it and try to transform the reality.
Beautiful.
And maybe it's a warning that it's the prophets that are getting it wrong. Like we're the people who claim themselves to be the spokespeople of religion who are the ones who are getting religion wrong, and the ones who are trying to defy and challenge might be the real prophets of this story.
Yeah, well, it's a good thing you're the rabbi here because that was amazing. Yeah, really.
I probably read this from you, so it's a good interpretation. It's yours.
That's very beautifully put, really. Yeah. Class dismissed? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Not to belabor, but maybe
You want to go back to the fish, don't you?
They're an expression. They're an expression of God's power. Is that a possibility that? And we have, for being sent, there's the flood. There's being put into the side with fish. Is that this whole play of animals and nature?
Is that what?
Is that an expression of God or that thing of which we should be in awe? Or is that a piece of something that we as humans should be humbled before?
Right. Which is almost the opposite of what Rabbi Graus is saying. I'm going to leave that as a machloket l'shem shamayim. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the conversation is a distinction between nature and humanity and our relationship between nature and humanity. This is your job. But perhaps it's God reminding Jonah that at the end of the day, he is the one in command of nature, that he'll determine whether or not he's going to actually destroy Nineveh. And hey, if I tell you to go tell Nineveh I'm going to destroy them, just do the thing because he knows what's happening in the hearts of his own people. But it's at the end of the day, he sent a fish because he can't send a fish because he's God in the context. He can send a fish and the fish will swallow you. Like I can make a flood happen because I am God.
That's more in the Job mode that we talked about yesterday, where God is saying, I know.
Yeah, it just strikes me, it's very interesting because you brought up the thing about reading the book of Jonah before. And our focus is often on Jonah. And I think the message of Jonah is, don't be like Jonah.
Yeah.
Because he's the only one who doesn't change throughout the entire book.
Yeah.
So it's both about the possibility of change and also you're dead to the world around you if you can't possibly fathom change. Because God and the people, everybody changes except for the messenger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say thank
you. This is our immeasurable gratitude to you, Judy. And I'm just thinking about the Hasidic teaching that we often share here that basically 40 days to change your life from Rosh Chodesh Elul, from the first day of the month of Elul until Yom Kippur is 40 days. And really baked into our tradition is the assumption that even if we do this for 50 years, 1 year, we might not have to anymore because we might actually be transformed. And I feel that your Torah is the seed of transformation in my heart, and I hope in all of our hearts. And we're so grateful to you. So thank you so much. Wow. And we'll join for Birkat HaMazon. Shir HaMalach B'Shuv Adonai Shivat Zion Yekol Simach Simach Shol Shol